Hello everyone, Loremaster of SoTech here, and I cannot be bothered to put a shirt on for this video, so you get little guy screeching autistically at the screen, which is, you know, basically what most of my content is anyway. So, hopefully you're all having a lovely Friday into the week. When I made a video covering patch 7.1 just a little bit ago, one of the things that I said in the video is that I wanted to do a follow-up stream discussing a post CA had put out on Reddit where they talked about the patch, but they also included some additional information in regards to what patches are going to look like for 2026, which is a notable change from the patches in 2025. So in 2025, we had a pretty decent number of patches, especially in the latter half of the year, where we got a ton of like little fixes and stuff. But one of the really nice things was that each of the patches came with a new unit. So this is, for instance, how we got the Grand Cathay bomber throwers. It's how we got the orc boys with swords and orc boys with, was it, we see we got the goblins with sword and shield. And did we get an orc boy unit? Anyway, yeah, we got some greenskin units. And then we also got all of the new lizard men blessed spawning units. So we got a good amount of stuff. It wasn't like a ton of things. Oh, we also got grave guard with halberds. That was another thing we got. So there was a good number of units. And they, you know, none of them were like huge earth-shaking changes, but you know, they were just nice little updated tidbits that would usually give a roster kind of a new tool that they sort of needed, but it wasn't necessarily worth like waiting until a full DLC, because it was mostly using units that we already had and just giving them new weapons so that they could perform a different role. But we see in this article that this is going to be changing for this year. So originally, patch 7.1 was actually going to be a hotfix, because it is a hotfix. Like that, it's just a big hotfix is really what it is. So the reason they did this is this change is partly due to the volume of the issues we're addressing, as well as the general evolution of our hotfixes into much larger bundles of fixes. Moving forward, we'll be using the term hotfix to describe focused updates aimed at fixing high-impact issues in the wake of a release. So, to be fair, it sounds like what they're really doing is wanting to make hotfixes more like what they actually are, what the term usually means, which is that when you do a hotfix, it's normally supposed to be a very rapid repair job to something that has been broken, or that like a new release. It's usually like a pack, you know, it's like a very tiny like bzz thing and you're done. Whereas we've been kind of getting them very continuously for a while. And anyway, so let's read over what this says. Let's see. This also sets up for changes how we approach patches in Warhammer 3 in 2026. With our focus this year being on resolving bugs, improving core game stability, and ensuring you're able to have a better experience with the content you already own. Patches will less frequently, but so not always, but will less frequently include new content, larger quality of life improvements, and feature overhauls, but only for the time being, with these instead arriving as part of our larger update patches. This approach also frees up our design team to put more of their time and focus onto future DLC content. Lords of the End Times, along with the End Times update that comes with it, is a hefty undertaking, and we want to make sure that it gets the attention, polish, and care it deserves. Reworks as part of our major updates is still something we're doing. For example, Nagash's impending arrival is also allowing us to revisit existing Vampire Counts content, and we'll talk more about the work we're doing on that front later in the year. Moving on from the riveting topic of patch versioning, the latest round of campaign AI changes mentioned back in January hasn't been as effective at resolving the stacking and idling armies as we'd hoped. That said, the ball is rolling in the right direction and work hasn't stopped. We know this is a major bugbear for many of you, and we wanted to make sure that we've made substantial headway before we roll anything out. We'll share more on this topic as soon as it's ready. Thanks for bearing with us on this long-term headache. Elsewhere, Milcho and the Bottle team are still working on what's next in the world of Siege improvements. We've seen a lot of comments asking for an update on this, and I'm hoping to have more to give you in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that. And just to get ahead of the replies, this doesn't mean that the larger scale reworks and overhauls that you've heard Rich and the crew talk about in the past, such as Bretonia, are off the table. We still aim to look at these in the future, but don't expect us to have anything to show or say on these fronts until after the summer. Back to the boring stuff. Moving forward, you'll see us name our releases in the following criteria. Hot fixes, which will be in this case, if they were to put out a hot fix, it'd be 7.1.1. Urgent fixes to high impact issues introduced in the most recent update or patch. Patches, which in this case would be like 7.1, or the next one would be 7.2. Primarily bug fixes and balancing adjustments, may occasionally include larger quality of life changes and new or refreshed content. And then X updates, so in this case it would be 8.0, substantial update accompanying paid DLC content, likely to include free LC content, race reworks, feature overhauls, quality of life improvements, bug fixes, battle balancing. So, when it comes to the direction that Total War Warhammer 3 is going, I will say that generally, I would say pretty much in every case, that I think this is the right call. It is, of course, a little sad for those of us, myself included, that we're really enjoying the getting one little unit for every patch. I think it kind of helped make patches exciting beyond just the oh, the game works better now. Also being oh, there's a reason to pick up this one faction you maybe haven't played in a while. Because there's a new unit, especially as there are quite a few units that I'm still quite eager to see receive that level of update, not in the sense of it's new, exciting, crazy new content, but in that we're taking a unit that's already been in the game for quite some time and maybe giving them an additional variant that they had in tabletop. So for instance, I know one of the ones that I've been really hoping for would be a Dragon Ogres update that gives, so right now we just have Dragon Ogres and Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, but I would really love if we had Dragon Ogres with additional hand weapons, Dragon Ogres with halberds, and Dragon Ogres with great weapons. So maybe have the variant that's already in the game be the great weapon variant, and then we could get the halberd variant and the additional hand weapon variant as one of these patches, and then do the same thing for the Dragon Ogre Shaggoths, because that would actually make taking an entire Dragon Ogre army, if you're playing Collect Sun Eater, a much more viable proposition that his campaign could theme around. And you would also have the joys of, it would allow the Warriors of Chaos to have something that much more accurately mirrors the Minotaurs, where it's oh, well, the halberd variant is designed as anti-large, and the great weapon variant, right? I guess for them, I guess that's how they do it, is they probably make the great weapon variant the armor piercing version, the hard armor piercing version. The halberd variant would probably be the anti-large version, and then the additional hand weapons would be the anti-infantry version. So your Dragon Ogres could be kind of customized to deal with various kinds of opponents, and I just think that'd be really exciting. But there's other ones as well, I'd love to see Ushabti with great weapons, or I would love to see, we always could use more variants of greenskins. I would love to see Night Goblin netters, that are able to throw nets at people, at least as an ability. I would love to see, oh gosh, off the top of my head, I mean, there's tons of greenskin, I'd love to see Biggin variants. We still need more, there's still a lot of greenskin variants missing, but it's not something I need, though. And I think one of the things that we definitely saw last year, the biggest thing that happened last year, besides just the release of Tides of Torment, was the whole thing about that CA wasn't responding fast enough to significant bugs, which is a very valid criticism. So we see here that I think they kind of landed in a bit of a happy medium, where the hotfix system will now be appropriately used as actual hotfixes, where instead of it being that the goal is to get out lots of them, or to have the patches be somewhat smaller but they always come with a unit, instead redressing it where bugs are the primary focus for at least the first half of 2026. And let's be real, the reason they're doing this, to be very, very blunt, is Lords of the End Times needs to be a very successful DLC. I would say with a fair amount of confidence that CA is not going to be releasing a new major game this year. Like, I don't think Total War Warhammer 3 or Total War Warhammer 40,000, I don't think it's coming out this year, because I feel like they're going to want at least 9 months of, you know, like, time of, oh, look, it's happening this year, which I just don't really feel like is going to be the case. At least not based on where, I mean, still, we're only in mid-February, so there's still time for them to like come out in like March and April and be like, boom, we're hitting 40K really hard. But I am really expecting 40K to be early next year, and for like Lord of the End Times to basically come out, and then the rest of 2026 is pretty much going to be dedicated to like deep faction dives and early access and all this other crazy stuff, and like conventions and all these things, like CA hopefully getting back into going to conventions and like showing off gameplay and stuff like they used to do back in the good old days. So that's what I'm hoping to see with 40K, is that like they have like a huge marketing campaign for it and let people really have a chance to like get their hands on it and see lots of details and stuff. But that's gonna take time. So if that's the case, that means that Lords of the End Times is going to be the biggest Creative Assembly release in 2026. And to be fair, it is huge. Like it is a massive expansion. Calling it a DLC doesn't even really feel appropriate because its scale is so big. It's more like a classic expansion, right? And, you know, it's almost more like what Frozen Throne was to like Warcraft 3 or you know, back in those days where you'd have to go like, you know, it was like a 0.5. So, you know, it's like Total War Warhammer 3.5 as opposed to just another DLC. But for Lords of the End Times to be what it needs to be, the game needs to be in as stellar a place as possible. Like, if CA is going to do the right thing, which I hope they're going to do in this case, what this means is that the Siege update needs to be out, and it needs to be good, or at least bug-free. They need to have fixed all of the major bugs that everyone keeps like struggling with. Like the AI needs to behave as good as it possibly can. People need to feel like shooting units are working as they feel like they should. People need to feel like when they give orders to units that the units are behaving appropriately and like they're not taking forever to turn around or moving in weird ways. So as much as I would love for the focus to have been on, hey, let's make sure we're drip feeding new content in with all of our updates, I do think that for the long-term health of the game, it is better at this point to focus almost entirely on, we need to make this ship sail as smooth as fucking possible before we drop the end times on top of it. And hopefully the game is fun and exciting and in the best place it has ever been, just in time for the biggest release that's happened since Warhammer 3 itself, which obviously didn't release in a good state. That wasn't a good time for anyone. So it is as disappointing as I find it that we're not continuously getting those little bonus units. I do suspect that they will return pretty much immediately after Lords of the End Times, and we might even see a couple between now and then. But I would suspect that we'll probably see none between now and Lords of the End Times, because especially at the end of the day, in order for someone to make those units, they need to pull someone from the DLC teams to come help to like actually design the units and make sure they have like appropriate animations and yada yada yada, and all that stuff. Even if you're doing something relatively straightforward, like, oh, we're going to give the Dragon Ogres more weapon variants. that's still going to require someone to like come in and clean up the Dragon Ogre animations when they're like the halberds could probably 1-for-1 use the exact same animations. But, you know, for the like additional hand weapons, that's going to require someone to actually like clean up the Dragon Ogre animations a bit, and make sure that they actually look normal when they're wielding 2 weapons instead of 1. You know, something I would love to see them do is I would love to see, as like a free update, someone to go through and like clean up the animations of melee characters. You know, make it where if a character's dual wielding weapons, they look distinctly different from someone that's wielding an axe and a shield, who looks distinctly different from someone that's wielding like just a sword. And maybe allow the characters that have more fencing like weapons, like maybe Sigvald gets like a unique, you know, maybe like fencing type characters like Sigvald the Magnificent get better improved animations that make it actually look like they're wielding like these slender, more stabbing weapons. I don't know, things like that could be fun. But at the end of the day, I do think this is the right choice ultimately. I would say that the upcoming Cathay DLC is, to me, feels very much like a kind of like, oh, we're, you know, giving this to you guys so you have something to tide you over, which we should be hearing stuff about pretty soon. But yeah, anyway, so I just kind of wanted to talk about this for a bit because I wasn't sure. They didn't really like talk about this on a number of places. This was kind of like hidden almost on the subreddit, so I just wanted to point it out to anyone that hadn't seen it yet, of that if you're someone that really loves the bonus units in the patches, just don't expect to see them until after summer, just so your expectations of what kind of things we're going to be seeing are in the right place, and that the majority of we're probably still going to see, I think, monthly patches, or at least like I would suspect we'll see like a patch every month, maybe a patch every like 4 to 6 weeks. They're almost all probably going to be focused entirely on bug fixes and AI behavior, and the biggest thing we probably have to look forward to between now and the end times, besides the Cathay DLC, will be the Siege update. And I would be willing to bet that the Siege update will probably be in the Cathay DLC. I imagine those are 2 very big things that they probably want to put together, but it'll be really interesting to see where that goes. I am looking forward to the Siege update personally. I will say that oh god, I miss the Siege beta so much. Like, the Siege beta sieges, were they perfect? No, gods no. But the current siege system we have is just so much worse. I hate the butt ladders. I think the butt ladders are genuinely the absolute worst part of the game. So I am really looking forward to their permanent death. I mean, they might make them a toggle for people that want them, because they do speed the game up. Like, if your goal is to just do sieges as fast as possible, then butt ladders are a net positive. But I personally hate that. I prefer sieges to feel more thematic. But that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, I'm not going to let this video get super crazy long, so I'll end it there. I hope you're all going into a lovely weekend. I'm going to be streaming this evening. If you're interested in coming by, I'm going to be streaming with some friends of mine, some weird game called Yap Yap or whatever. But expect more goodies soon, and I'll talk to y'all then. Take care.